Let's study some Talmud. We're going to start on the first page of the tractate. We're in tractate Sukkah, deals with the laws of the holiday of Sukkot. And we're in the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, as opposed to the Jerusalem Talmud, which I would like to get to at some point. I'm using the Mesivta Gemara, and I like it because they have on one side the regular standard page of Talmud, and on the other side they have commentary and explanation. So this is the first page of the tractate. It starts on page Beis. You have Beis 1 and Beis 2. So this would be Beis 2. Okay? And you have on the inside of the page, you have Rashi commentary, and on the outside of the page, you have Tosafos commentary. So we start with the Mishnah. This is the first Mishnah in Tractate Sukkah. It reads like this: a sukkah that is higher, more than 20 amos. Amma is a measurement. I think it's from your elbow to your wrist, or from your elbow to your end of your closed fist. It's something like this. It's about something like that, you know. So a sukkah that is higher, more than 20 of these amos, it's possible. It's not a valid sukkah. Rabbi Yehuda machshir, but Rabbi Yehuda he says it's kosher. Okay, so in the Hebrew, I'm going to read that again. Sukkah shehi gavaya lemala mayaser mama. A sukkah that is higher, over 20 amma, psula, Rabbi Yehuda machshir. Okay? V'she'ena gavaya asara tfachim. If it's not 10 tfachim high, this is a tafach. If it's not 10 of these high, v'she'en la shalish tafanais, or if it doesn't have 3 walls, or if it doesn't have 3 walls. V'shechamasa meruba mitzalasa, and also a case where the sun is greater than the shade. Right? You have on the sukkah, you have, besides the walls, you have a covering, a schach. And if the sunlight is greater than the shade that the schach provides, so in all these 3 cases, psula, it's forbidden. So what did we say? That's the Mishnah until here, and then the Talmud, the Gemara is going to talk. So we said a sukkah that is higher than 20 amos, like these, it's not kosher. Besides Rabbi Yehuda, he does say it's kosher. And if it's not at least 10 of tfachim high, and the case where it doesn't have 3 walls, and the case where the sun is more than the shade, in all 3 of those cases, it's pasul. Okay, so what does Rashi say? Before we see the Talmud, let's see what Rashi says on this. How do you find the Rashi? Right? So we just read the Mishnah, and until here where it says Gimel Mem, that's where the Gemara is going to start talking on that Mishnah. But now we want to see the Rashi, right? So we go in the inside column. The inner column is the Rashi commentary. So, right, it starts Sukkah, right? And we said that which is higher than 20 amma is pasul, but Rabbi Yehuda says it's kosher. So on those words that Rabbi Yehuda machshir, Rabbi Yehuda says kosher, says Rashi, B'Gemara mefarish pluktayod. In the Gemara, it's going to explain what's their argument. Okay? Why does Rabbi Yehuda say it's kosher even higher than 20 amos? We said we had 3 cases that are non-kosher sukkah. If it's not 10 tfachim tall, if it doesn't have 3 walls, and if the sun is greater than the shade it provides, right? So on this, Ushena Gavaya Asar, if it's not high 10, the Gemara Mefarish Taiman, the Gemara is going to explain the reason. On Shalish Stefanis, 3 walls, Nami B'Gemara Yalaflu. Also in the Gemara, it's going to learn it out. From where do we know this? That the sun is greater than the shade. Says Rashi, Hamuet, Batal, B'Roiv. The lesser the minority, the lesserness, the lesser part is batal, it's nullified in the majority. The minority is nullified to the majority. V'harehu kimi she'enai, and it's behold, it's similar to that it's not there. It's like the shade, the minority is non-existence. V'al shem schach kuri sukkah, and it's because of the schach, it's on the name of the schach covering that it's called a sukkah. So you need the schach, it's essential. And here, in this case, where the sunlight is greater than the shade the schach is provided, it's not, the shade is nullified. It's because of the shade that it's called a sukkah. Okay. All right. So what does the Gemara say? Tanan Hasam. We learned over there. Okay. Right. This is where the Gemara starts. Tanan Hasam, and we have a little gimel and a hey, and they take us to different notes here. It's going to tell us where to find that. So if we go to this gimel in the Mesoras Hashas, it says Eruvin, Beis Amud Aleph. So on the first page of a different tractate Eruvin, what does it say? It says Mavoi shehu gavaya me'esrim ama yima'i. A mavoi. What's a mavoi? I believe a mavoi means an alley. I believe a mavoi is an alley, but there's some type. We'll see. We'll get more explanations, but there's some type of marker that you need to have on the alleyway entrance or something, so that you know you're going from one domain to another on the Sabbath. Okay. So such a marker, if it's higher than 20 amma, which is the same measurement we said here, you have to make it smaller. You have to make it lower. Rabbi Yehuda says it's not necessary. Okay? So the Gemara, what does it want to know? It says, Ma'ishnagabe sukkah detari psula. What's the difference? Yeah, why is it different in regards to sukkah here? That it said it's psula. We taught that it's pasul. The sukkah that's higher than 20 is pasul. It's invalid. U'ma'ishnagabe mavai detani takanta. And what's unique or what's different in regards to the mavoi, the alley, that we taught a rectification? Because here we said a sukkah that's higher than 20 amma is invalid. And there we said an alley that's higher than 20 amma, lower it. We didn't say it's invalid, we said lower it. And here by the sukkah, we didn't say lower it, we said it's invalid. So why was it a different... Why did the author of the Mishnah, the Tana who authored this Mishnah, why is there a different language used in the case of the alley and in the case of the sukkah? Okay, so that's the question we're dealing with. So the Gemara is going to present an answer here. We're going to try to figure it out, okay? So sukkah d'oraisa, tani psula. Sukkah, which the law of the sukkah, it's a biblical law. It comes from the Araisa, the Bible itself. The Tana taught us psula. It's invalid. Mavoi d'Rabbanan tani takanta. The case of the alley, which is a rabbinic decree, we taught the rectification. Okay, so that's the first answer of the Gemara. That what's the difference? Why do we use different terms? In one case we say invalid, and in one case we say lower it. In one case we just say it's invalid. In one case we tell you how to fix it. What's the difference? So the Gemara's first attempt to answer is that they're different. One is a biblical law. The sukkah is a biblical law, and one is a rabbinic law. And in this biblical law, we're saying invalid, and in the rabbinic law, we are saying how to fix it. Why? I think Rashi's going to explain that to us, okay? So maybe we'll see those Rashis before we continue on in the... Okay, we're up to here by the Iba Sema. That's what we're up to. So now we're going to see the Rashis of the Gemara. So in the Rashi, we're up to here where the Gemara starts. It says, Mavai Shehu Gavaya, alleyway which is higher. Okay, so says Rashi, Mavai Shehu Sasu Mishleshet Stadin, Viroishai Pasuach L'Rishus Harabim. If you have an alleyway that's closed on three sides, and its head is open to the public domain, and there's courtyards opening up into this alley, and they go out and come in to the public domain. I guess from From the what? From the courtyards into the alley, or from the alley into the public domain? Maybe from the alley into the public domain. I'm not so sure. Okay. So this alleyway is considered a private domain to those people from those courtyards, that their courtyards open up into that alleyway. So for them, that's considered a private domain. And the sages, the wise ones, they forbade to take out from his domain to the domain of his friend without an eruv. An eruv is, I think it comes from the word of mixing. And how do we do it? There's a system set up where you can join your private domain with your friend's private domain, and then on the Sabbath, you can carry from your domain to his domain, even though it's not biblically forbidden to carry from a private domain to another private domain. But the sages did forbid it. But they with the eruv we can do it. Okay, shachatzeres kolachas rishutz la'atzma. That because the courtyards, each one is the domain of itself. And the alleyway is the domain of all of them. All the courtyards share this alleyway. And they required it in it a combination to combine all the courtyards with bread or with wine, and to put this combination in one of the courtyards. So you take some bread or you take some wine from all of the courtyards. They all contribute, and you put it into one of the courtyards, and through this they're all joined together under one domain. However that works. We have a little letter here, and in the Masoras HaShas it says it's going to be later on page 3 on folio 2. I guess they're going to explain it. It's going to, okay. Well, the ein lo mechitza revius, the karav hu liyois daimel l'rishus harabim, hitzrichu heker b'roishei hapasuach l'rishus harabim, oy lechi zakuf, oy koirei mikaisel l'kaisel. And since, or because, there is no fourth mechitza, divider, separator, wall, the karav hu liyois, right, and it's close to be similar to a public domain. It's close to being similar, so it's removed. It's not a public domain, but it's close to being similar to a public domain. Therefore, they required a recognizer, something to make it that you should recognize. They should see it and recognize at its head that is open to the public domain, so that you should recognize you're now entering into a private domain or the public domain. You're crossing this divide. What kind of divider? Oilechi zakuf, so or an upright beam. I believe a lechi is a beam. So, or like an upright beam, like a stick, upright. Or a kaire also is some type of beam. I'm not sure what's the difference between a lechi and a kaire, but or some type of, beam from wall to wall on the top, right? Again, here's the case. You have a bunch of courtyards. In each courtyard, you probably have a few different houses opening up into the courtyard. Those courtyards open up into an alleyway. That alleyway is closed on 3 sides, and on one side it's open to the public domain. Between the public domain and this alleyway, the rabbis said that you have to make or an upright beam standing up, like, from the floor going up, so that you recognize that you're traversing domains now, or you have to put from wall to wall up high. So, continuing the end of this Rashi, Vim Gavoya HaKoyer Me'esri Mama. If this koire, the one that's going from wall to wall, is higher than 20 amos, so that in that case, we said Yama'i. You have to make it smaller, and Rabbi Yehuda says you don't have to, right? So Yama'it, says Rashi, Yashbil. He's saying it means to lower it. What does it mean, make it smaller? It means lower it. And Rabbi Yehuda said, Ein tzarech, you're not required. Says Rashi, V'haz mifarish time, and there it's explained his reasoning. If you go to the Talmud there, in Erevin, on the first page. Okay, so then, right, so our question was why the difference in Why over here does it say if it's higher than 20, it's puzzle, invalid, and over there by the alleyway, it says lower it, make it smaller, lower it. So we said that sukkah digaraisa, right? Sukkah, which is it's a biblical law. Says Rashi, de esrim amadi la yalfinun midiraisa, because it's 20 amos. We said it has to be 20 amos, right? Her 20 amos, sukkah's, it's 20 amos. The sukkah, the 20 amos of sukkah, yalfinun midiraisa. We learn it out from the biblical law. The sages learn it out from the Bible itself. And before this Mishnah was taught or repeated, its measurement, the sukkah's measurement, was set from Sinai. It was already set from Sinai. Okay, so that's the difference between the sukkah and the mavoi, right? Again, sukkah midiraisa. That's Ramamadi la yalfinin midiraisa. V'kaidem shenishnas hamishim nemar shurim misinai. Sukkah, which is a biblical law, because her 20 amos or its 20 amos is learned from the Bible, and before the Mishnah was ever repeated or taught, it was said its measurement, the sukkah's measurement, from Sinai. Therefore, tani psula, right? The Gemara says we taught it's invalid. So it says Rashi shayach lemisni balashon pasul. It's shayach, it's appropriate to teach about it a lashon pasul, a way of saying invalid. As if to say you didn't make it according to the Torah and the law, right? So something that is biblically forbidden or biblically invalid, you can say invalid because you're not going according to the Torah and the law. Continuing, Mavoi though, the alley, says Rashi, Dekule midrabanan, that it's entirely rabbinic. Because according to the biblical law, it's enough that with its 3 walls that it has. And we don't need this kaire, this beam going from wall to wall, besides for the rabbinic, meaning it's only rabbinic that we need it. It's not biblical itself. Therefore, what? Tani takanta, we taught its rectification. Says Rashi, it's not appropriate to teach about it a way of saying invalid. Deman pasla koidem shenishnis mishnazu, because who made it invalid before this Mishnah was repeated or taught? When did you ever find that it's invalid? This is the first time you're telling me it's invalid. It's not really. It wasn't invalid from Sinai. You're making it invalid now. Behold, this is the beginning of its teaching and its commanding. Okay, let's go over that. So, what's the difference? Why in our Mishnah do we say over 20 amos? Invalid. And by the alleyway, the beam going across, we say if it's over 20, lower it. So the Talmud's first answer, approach is what? There's a difference, key difference. One is biblical and one is rabbinic. Here, where it's biblical, you could say it's appropriate to say invalid. Why? Because you're saying it's invalid according to the biblical law. It doesn't meet the biblical requirements. It's invalid. But by the mavoi, the beam going across, that's only in a rabbinic decree. You can't say pasul. You can't say invalid. Invalid seems, the Gemara is saying, it would imply invalid from the biblical law itself, and that's not the case. It's not invalid because this whole thing is only rabbinic. You don't need, meaning psula means you're invalid. You're not fulfilling the requirements of the Bible itself. That's what it sounds like. But you can't apply that in the case of the alleyway because the whole thing is not from the Bible. It's just a rabbinic decree, which is important, but the language of invalid doesn't apply there. That's the Gemara's first answer. Because it would imply that it's invalid from the time of Sinai. But that's not the case. We're only teaching for the very first time in the Mishnah that it's invalid. So, pasul makes it sound like you're going against it doesn't meet the requirements that were set out previously. But there were no requirements set out previously. It wasn't forbidden. These rules weren't set at Sinai in the case of the alleyway. Okay? That's the first answer. Clearly, there's a problem with that answer because the Gemara is going to present a second answer. So in a case like this, where the Gemara is going to present a second answer, you have to think about what was wrong with the first answer. Why didn't the Gemara like the first answer? And it can't be like a terrible answer, meaning it's obviously, the Gemara brought it as an answer. So obviously it makes some sort of sense, right? Okay, but why is the Gemara going to bring a second answer now? We'll see, Vibai Sema. And if you want, if you want to say, this is where we're up to, Vibai Sema. And if you want to say, Bidiaraisa Nami Tani Takanta, in the case of a biblical law, it's also taught the rectification. We could also say lower it. Meaning in the first answer, we don't say lower it in the case of a biblical law. We would say it's invalid. In the first answer, if it's a biblical law, you would just say invalid. That was our way of thinking. It's only in a rabbinic law where we can't say invalid, so we have to say how to rectify it. And according to the second answer, it's not like that. According to the second answer, really, even by the biblical laws, we would also say the rectification to lower it. Mihu, however, sukkah denefishin mile. This sukkah that has many parts to it. There's many, right? There's like 4 different things we said in this first Mishnah right here. So therefore, pasuk v'tani psula. He gave up psak, he gave the law, and he taught it's invalid. Okay. Mavoy deloy nafish mile tani takanta. In that case, in Eruvin, on that first page, that first Mishnah, where it's talking about the Mavoy and the Koire going from wall to wall in the alley, there's not that many laws in that Mishnah. It's a shorter Mishnah, I guess. It's more concise. So therefore, he was able to, extend his words and taught you how to fix it. He said Yemai. Which I don't really get the answer, because Yemai and Psula, they're both one word. They're both one word. Not only are they both one word, Yemai is actually shorter. It's 4 letters, and Psula is 5 letters. So I'm clearly not understanding something correctly here. We'll see Rashi, okay? So we said, if you want, say like this, that even also by biblical law, says Rashi, Shayach Meimer Takanta, it's appropriate to say it's rectification. Sukkah denfishi milsa, sukkah, which has many words or many details, says Rashi, ve'ein doimen tikunoi sen zulazu. And it's not similar, it's rectification, this one for this one, meaning and it's required to change the lashain, the tongue, the words that we're using for each rectification. For example, begavaya yamai. So if it's higher than 20, we have to say, okay, so lower it. Uksheina gavaya yagbia. And if it's not high enough, so then we have to say, okay, so raise it, elevate it. V'shein la shalish tefanes yasala. And if there isn't 3 walls, make for it 3 walls, right? V'shramasa meruba Yosef Schach, and if the sun is greater than the shade, then so increase the shade. Hilkach pasuk v'tani psula. Therefore, he just gave the law. He gave the ruling, and he taught it's invalid. Dematze lemichlalinhu lekulahu bahach psula, because he's able to include all those 4 cases in that psula. He could just say pasul. Or the final 3 cases, because the first case we said psula by itself, because we had to bring in the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, right? But in any case, he could just say pasul. He doesn't have to say elevate it, add a wall, add tzchach. Like he doesn't have to give. He could just say across the board all these cases are pasul, invalid. Because it was established to us, meaning it was established for us. And I have here in the parentheses, in Psachim, Tractate Psachim, page 3, folio 2, that a person should teach to his students in a short way. Be concise in your teaching. So that's what we're doing here. We're being concise in our teaching. We're just saying, right? Mavoi loy nafish mile. But the alley that doesn't have many details, many rules there in the Mishnah, but Isa Mishnah, says Rashi, in that Mishnah, there's not too many details. Therefore, he could teach it the rectification. He could say if it's not 20, I'm saying if it's over 20, so lower it, right? That makes sense. Again, this is the second answer. We're saying if you want, you could say really, even by the biblical laws, we would say lower it. The reason why we don't say lower it is because then I would have to say if it's higher than 20, lower it. If it doesn't have 3 walls, build a third wall. If the sun is greater than the shade, increase the shade. And if it's not 10 tefachim, I might have gone out of order there, but if it's not 10 tefachim, then make it higher. But we don't want to do all that, so we just say in these cases invalid, because we want to be concise. Okay? So in review, what we did so far. We said that a sukkah that's not higher than 20, a sukkah that is higher than 20 amos, the schach is higher than 20 amos, invalid. Rabbi Yehuda says it's fine. We said if it doesn't have 3 walls, if the sunlight in there is greater than the shade it provides, or if it's not 10 tefachim tall, 10 of these tefachim, in all of those cases, invalid. The Gemara wanted to know why do we say that if it's not 20, it's invalid, but by the case of the 20 of the alleyway, the marker, if it's higher than 20, we don't say invalid, we just say lower it. What's the difference? So the Gemara's first answer was, listen, the cases are different. One is a biblical law and one is a rabbinic law. By the biblical law, you could say it's invalid, because invalid implies you don't meet the requirements of the biblical law or of the previously set law. And in our case, in this sukkah, it's a biblical law, so it makes sense to say invalid. You're not meeting the requirements that the Bible set out at Sinai. Whereas in the case of the alleyway, it wouldn't be appropriate to say invalid, which implies that that it doesn't meet the set requirements. We never had set requirements for an alleyway. The Bible never had. This whole thing is a rabbinic creation, and the rabbis are creating it here in the Mishnah. This is the first time they're teaching these laws. So it wouldn't be appropriate to say invalid. What requirements am I not meeting that were previously set out? It's being set out for the first time here. That's the first answer. The second answer, we say alternatively, if you want, you could say like this, that really... Wait, yeah, what was sorry, hold on. The first answer was what? That it has to do with if it was previously taught these laws. If it was previously taught, then you can say invalid because you're not meeting those set out requirements. In the second answer, we're saying, really, even in the biblical law, we would say how to rectify it. We would say how to rectify it. Why don't we? Because there's too many details there and we want to be concise. We don't want to give a rectification for each case. Here in Sukkah, we don't want to give the rectification for each case. Lower it, elevate it, add shade, or lower it. Oh, or build a third wall, right? We don't want to, because we want to be concise, so we just say invalid. Even though really we would give the meaning in the first answer, we only say this rectification, how to fix it, because it's our rabbinic decree. And we can't say invalid. But really, we would always say invalid. That's the first answer, I think. That really, we always would use this word invalid. Why over there don't we use the word invalid by the alleyway? Because it's not applicable, because it was never previously set. In the second answer, it's not that we would always say invalid and we just can't in one case. In the second answer, it's like, really, maybe we would always give the rectification, the opposite. Not that we would always want to say invalid and in just one case we can't. But rather, no, really, we would always give the rectification. And really, we should say, in our case, lower it. Why don't we say it in our case? Because there's too many details and we want to be concise. Okay? All right, let's continue into the Gemara. Minahani mili. Okay? We have our acronyms. Minahani mili. From where do we know this? Or from where these words? Mina is from where. Hane is these. Mile is words. So from where are these words? Like, what biblical verse taught us these laws, okay? I guess of being 20 is too, if it's higher than 20, it's invalid. Right? What does Rashi say? Yeah, Rashi doesn't say anything here. So minal hanimili, from where do we know this? I guess that it has to be 20, right? I'm sorry, that it cannot be more than 20. How do we know this, that it cannot be more than 20? Amar Rabba, so says Rabba. The Amar Kra, because the verse says, and I have an aleph here telling me where the verse is. It's in Vayikra. I think Vayikra is Leviticus, right? It's a third book of the 5 books. In chapter 23, verse 43. Shalom. What does it say? Leman yedu darasechem ki basukos heshavti es bnei Yisrael. And the rest of the verse says, in the Talmud, it doesn't quote the whole thing. It just quotes, Leman yedu darasechem ki basukos heshavti es bnei Yisrael. So let's read that whole verse and try to translate it. So Leman yedu darasechem, so that your generations will know, they will have the da'as. That in Sukkos, these tents or dwellings, these huts, I dwelled the children of Israel. I made them dwell. When I took them out, in my taking them out from the land of Egypt, I am Hashem your God. Okay, so from this, Rabbah wants to say, from this verse, we know that it can't be more than 20 amos high. How does he know that? So, this is where his logic comes in, okay? Until 20 amos high, a person knows that he's sitting in a sukkah, that he's dwelling in a sukkah. Higher than 20 amos, he doesn't know that he's dwelling in a sukkah. Because his eyes don't rule. His eyes don't rule. There's no ruling of his eyes, meaning he can't see up there. Over 20 amos, he can't see up high. And I think we're going to say later on the next page or somewhere soon, this is talking about a sukkah that's a certain measurement. It's like the minimum measured sukkah. If it's bigger, your eyes will see, and it can be higher than 20 amos according to Rabbah. Because his whole logic is that it says that your generations will know, so that your generations will know that I made them dwell in the sukkah. So you have to know that you're sitting in a sukkah. Right? We're going to see Rashi, he'll explain it better. But let's just first, right? So you have to know you're sitting in a sukkah. More than 20, you're not going to know you're sitting in a sukkah. Unless it's much bigger. We're going to qualify later. We don't say that yet, I think. But let's say we have a standard 4 amma, like 4 of these by 4, the minimum. I think that's the minimum. Maybe it's not the minimum. We'll see even the minimum. But let's say you have the standard 4 by 4, let's just say. It's very small. Higher than 20 amma, your eyes can't see. The trajectory of your eyes don't go upwards like that. You don't know that you're sitting in a sukkah, okay? And you have to know that you're sitting in a sukkah, which, if it's too high, you're not going to know you're sitting in a sukkah. So that's Rabbah's answer, okay? So let's see Rashi. Lema'an yedu, so that they will know. So he's interpreting the verse like this. Say sukkah, make a sukkah, sheyeshivasa nikeres lecha, that its dwelling is recognized to you. Tichsiv, because it's written, Yedu ki basukas hashafti, that they will know that in sukkahs I made them dwell. Sivisi leishev, I commanded them to dwell. Halchi darish lein. This is how he's expounding the verse. V'afagav de'en yoytze midei pshutai, and even though it doesn't go out from its simple hand, from the hand of simplicity, meaning the verse was talking about the hekefanani akavod, of the surrounding of the clouds of glory, right? That's what the verse was talking about, that I made them dwell in sukkahs. It was talking about however, Darshina le drasha, he expounded it for this drasha. Not so clear, but okay. That the eyes don't rule, says Rashi, because he doesn't see the schach covering, the shade covering. The sukkah hainu schach kishma, and the sukkah is the schach. The sukkah hut that we build is the schach shade, like its name. Schach sukkah. It's the same word. So how do you know that it can't be more than 20? So Rabbah, from which verse? So Rabbah brings a verse. He says, you know where the sages knew this from? From which verse in the Bible? We're saying it's not a rabbinic decree. It's an actual biblical law. How did the rabbis know it's true? From which verse? So Rabbah's opinion, it's from this verse, that so that you will know that I made you dwell in the dwellings, which is really in a reference to the clouds of glory, that they would have to know about the clouds of glory. But he's not saying that it doesn't mean that. He's saying, yes, it also means that, but he's also expounding it. It's called drush. He's expounding on it and saying it also means that when you're in the sukkah, you have to know that you're sitting in a sukkah. Something like that, I think. Okay? If we really wanted to, by the way, we could read how they explain it in the commentary, and then also in the back they have they go through the Rashis and explain the Rashis also. And by the way, we haven't seen any of the Tosafos yet. We haven't done that at all. Tosafos is a little more in depth, a little more complex. That's Rabbah. Okay, let's see the other opinions. Rabbi Zera. Interesting. His name, the first one was Rabbah. Rabbah means great. Now we have Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera is small. So we had great, and now we have Rabbi small. Very interesting. Rabbi Zera Amar Mehacha. Rabbi Zera says from here, from this verse, V'sukatil etzel yoma mecharev. This verse is in Isaiah 4:6. Yeshaya. I think that's Isaiah, right? Yeshaya. It says, V'sukatil etzel yoma mecharev u'lemachse u'lemister mizerem u'mimatar. The sukkah will be for shade during the day from the charev. I don't know what it is. Maybe the sun, or I don't know what charev means. Chorev. Mecharev. Charev, I don't know. And for like a covering and a concealment from the, I guess the zerem and matar, I think are maybe wind and rain, or two kinds of rain. But the idea is, you see there, that the sukkah has to be for a shade during the day from charev. Okay? Ada surmama adam yeshiv itzel sukkah. It says like this: until 20 amos, you're sitting in the shade of the sukkah, meaning the schach, right? The malam yasr mama, but if it's too high, if it's over this 20 amos, 20 of these, right, of the arm's length from the elbow, ein adam yoshev b'tzel sukkah. He's not sitting. The person is not sitting in the shade of the sukkah. Ela b'tzel defanais. But at this point, he's just sitting in the shade of the walls. If the walls are that high, and again, we're going to qualify it later and say we're talking about a certain size sukkah. If it's very big, it wouldn't apply here. But in such a small sukkah, let's say the minimum measurement sukkah, let's just say, if it's too high, you're not sitting in the shade of the covering, the schach on top of you. You're sitting in the shade of the walls. The shade of that the schach is providing. It's not where you're sitting. It would be outside of the sukkah at this point. Just based on, just how the sun is shining down, I guess. What are we talking about? In the middle of the day? And I mean, if it's right on top of you, it wouldn't matter, right? I don't know. Maybe the sun's not directly on top of us anyway. So even in the middle of the day, it still would apply, actually. It's all talked about for sure. You can go in depth if you want. What does Rashi say? Okay, we said Vesukkatil itzel, and the sukkah will be for you shade. Mashma ein schach ela ha'asur litzel. This, where it says that sukkah should be for you shade, implies that there's no schach, the covering, rather that which is made for shade. So it has to be made for shade. It has to be providing shade. I don't know. It's funny. His words are that are made for shade. Ha'asur litzel, not that they're providing shade, but that they're made for shade. I guess if it's too high, they're not made for shade, meaning it's not providing you any shade. So how can you say that it's providing shade?
How are you?
Ela b'tzal defanis, but if it's too high, you're not sitting in the shade of the sukkah, but rather the shade of the walls. Shehatzlalin magian zelezeh mitoich goyvan shel defanis ve'ein tzarich schach, because the shade, if it's that high, they reach this one to this one. They reach this one to this one within the height of the walls. The shades that are being provided from the coverings, I guess, they reach from this one to this one within the height of the walls. Sorry, no. So the shades that are being provided by the walls, I believe, they reach this one to this one within the height of the walls, or from the height of the walls, and you don't need a covering. Meaning, even if you take off the covering, you're still completely in the shade just from the walls. Okay. And later we're going to establish their argument to Rabbi Zera, this opinion here of Rabbi Zera. He's only talking about in a case where it doesn't have besides for 4x4, meaning it's just 4 amos by 4 amos. If it's bigger, the reasoning wouldn't apply there. I said the same thing about the first case, Rabbi. I might have been wrong there. Okay, we'll see. Because it was established to the rabbis that at this measurement of 4x4, and if it's 4x4, 4 square amos, and the walls are more than 20 amos, at that, you're not in the, there's no shade from the covering, it's only in the shade from the walls. Okay, back to the Gemara. Amar le Abaye, so Abaye says to him, to Rabbi Zera, Ele me'ata ha'oise sukasei ba'ashtareis karnayim hachinami dulei have sukkah. So Abaye says to Rabbi Zera, so are you, Ele me'ata, rather from here, like it's an expression, but it means, are you going to tell me that one who made his sukkah in ashtareis karnayim, it's also not considered a sukkah? So what's ashtareis karnayim? It's a place. Let's see Rashi. Ashtareis karnayim shnei harim gedolim v'hashvela beinehem. There are 2 great mountains, and there's a valley between them. Shvela is like a low place, like a low plain between them. And because of the height of the mountains, the sun doesn't shine there in the valley. Yes, you have these 2 big mountains with a very, very low valley in between them, and the mountains are so high, there's no sunlight there. You're completely in the shade there. So I guess the sun's not right on top of us. It's like on an angle. So Amarle, so Rabbi Zera says back to Abaye, Hasam dal ashtareis karnayim ikatsel sukkah. There, in that case, if you remove ashtareis karnayim, these mountains, you have the shade of the sukkah. The sukkah, the covering is still providing shade. As long as you just remove the mountains, you'll still have shade from the sukkah. Hacha dal defanos lekatsel sukkah. But here, if you were to remove the walls that are covering up all and giving you shade, if you were to remove the walls, you would not have shade from the schach. I guess the shade that it would be providing would be outside of your sukkah, of your 4x4. It would be over there. It wouldn't be on top, right? So says Rashi, Dal defanes lekatzal sukkah. If you remove the walls, you don't have shade from the covering. Shechama ba mitachteha, because the sun would come underneath it, from underneath it. Nimtza shama batel, comes out there, it's nullified. The sun comes from underneath it. I don't know what it's trying to say. I guess it means it's not providing you shade. It would be I think it would be somewhere else. I don't know how you read it into the words of Rashi, but the sun comes underneath and it puts the shade somewhere else. If it's right on top of you, you're in the shade, but only if it's not too high. If it gets very, very high, the ceiling, the shade that it's providing is not going to be, even if the cover is right on top of you, the sun is going to come underneath it. It's not providing you any shade if it's too high. It has to be lower for it to provide you shade. Okay? So far, we had two answers. How do we know that it can't be more than 20 amos? Rabbah said because you have to know that you're dwelling in the sukkah, the verse says, and if it's too high, you don't know you're dwelling in a sukkah because your eyes can't see it. Rabbi Zera says because we see from another verse that the sukkah is made for shade and it has to be giving you shade, and if it's too high, it's not giving you shade. Now we have a third answer. Rava. Before it was Rabbah, then Rabbi Zera, now it's Rava. Rava says from here, in Sukkos, in these tents, dwellings, whatever, huts, you shall dwell 7 days. That's the verse. Where is it? It's in, again, Leviticus, like the first one, 23:42. It says, Basukos teishu shivas yamim kol ha'ezrach b'Yisrael yeshvu basukos. In these sukkos you shall dwell 7 days. All the citizens are Ezrach, I think is like a citizen, yeah. In Israel, in Israel, they should dwell in these sukkos, okay? So says Rava, Amar Torah kol shivas hayamim tzei midiras keva v'sheb b'diras aray. Rava is saying like this: the verse is telling you, the Torah, the Bible is telling you that all 7 days you shall go out of your permanent dwelling and you shall dwell you should go out from your permanent house and you shall dwell in a temporary house. He's learning that from this verse, that in Sukkot you shall dwell 7 days. I guess from the 7 days, maybe it has to be a dwelling of 7 days, a temporary dwelling. We'll see Rashi, okay? But hold on. So here's his logic. Ad Esr Mama Damaise Diras Are. Until 20 amos, a person makes his dwelling a temporary dwelling. Once it's higher than 20 amos, 20 cubits, in Adamaisa Diras Are, a person doesn't make his dwelling a temporary dwelling, Ela Diras Keva, but a permanent dwelling. And again, it's going to be Abaye challenging him, right? We had Abaye challenged Rabbi Zera, now Abaye is going to challenge Rava. Amar le Abaye, so we're going to see Rashi in a minute, but hold on. Amar le Abaye, so Abaye says to him, Ela Me'ata, rather from here, again, it's an expression, it means, are you going to tell me? If he making walls of iron, and he covers with schach on top of them. So you're going to tell me it's not a sukkah? Because you're saying it has to be a temporary dwelling, a 7-day dwelling. Oh, so that's why it can't be higher than 20 amos? Okay, so what if it's not higher than 20 amos? What if it's only 10 amos or whatever, but it's made of iron? It's a permanent dwelling, right? So Amarle, so this is Rava says back to Abaye, this is so I am telling you. This is what I'm trying to say. Until 20 cubits, amos, that a person makes his dwelling a temporary dwelling. If he makes it a permanent dwelling, in that case, he also fulfills his obligation. It's kosher. Higher than 20 amos cubits, that a person makes his dwelling a permanent dwelling. If he made it a temporary dwelling, he made it higher than 20, which normally is a permanent dwelling. But he made it in a temporary way, he also didn't fulfill it. Meaning it's not, we don't care so much is the dwelling a permanent structure or not. We know, according to Rava, that it has to be a temporary type of structure. But based on that, we learn the height. That it has to be the height of a temporary structure. According to Rava's understanding, the verse is telling us that the sukkah that you dwell in has to be a temporary type of dwelling. What does that mean? It means that it can't be over the height, which normally would require a permanent dwelling. But if you made a permanent dwelling and it wasn't that height, it's still forbidden, it's still not kosher. And if you made a permanent dwelling lower, right, at a height that was not that high, and it was normally that's a temporary dwelling, and you made it permanent, it's fine. Even with iron walls, it's fine, as long as it doesn't go over that standard where usually you would build a permanent structure. Right? It's interesting because he's saying it has to be a temporary structure. That's how you know it can't be that high, because that high is not temporary. But even so, he's saying at the end of the day, it could really be a permanent structure. Isn't that interesting? And then even if it's a temporary structure, but it's higher than that height, which would normally be a permanent structure, then it's not kosher. It's just very interesting how we're learning that it has to be a temporary structure, and therefore it can't be too high. But at the end of the day, he's saying really it could be too high. I'm sorry, no, not it can't be too high. It really could be a permanent structure. Why can't it be so high? Because then it's a permanent structure. What if I don't make it that high, but I make it permanent? Oh, that's fine. It's interesting logic. Okay, what does Rashi say? Shivas Yamim, 7 days, right? The verse said, so Sukkah shel Shivas Yamim, v'suloi dahainu arei. So it has to be a Sukkah of 7 and not more. And that is temporary. V'daye b'mechitzos kales. And it's like, I guess, enough with light walls. A 7-day dwelling, you don't need to make permanent walls. You can make light walls, weak walls. Okay? The Malam asked him, what if it was higher than 20? If it's higher than 20 cubits, you have to make its foundation and walls permanent so that it shouldn't fall. Kavua doesn't mean permanent. It means like set. You have to make them set that it shouldn't fall. Okay, then we had the challenge of Abaye, right? And Rava said to him, like, this is what I'm saying. Until 20 cubits that a person makes it, etc. So it says Rashi, shaper dummy. That's fine. Even if he makes it up with iron walls, as long as it's not 20 high. Why? Because you certainly have within the keva, the permanent, the temporary. And he made it according to the Torah. Because even though it can last forever, it can also last the 7 days. So you made it for 7 days. So you lasted 7 days. You made a dwelling of 7 days. And it, against your will, it's an expression, but it means it must be that the Torah is not makbid, it's not specific. It doesn't care on the temporariness besides for the sake of the measurement. We only care about this temporary, permanent situation in regards to the measurement of how high it is. To give to you a measurement in its height. That it should be able to stand on temporary foundations. Interesting. So even if you made it permanent, you still fulfilled it. The Torah doesn't care if it's permanent or not. It only cares in the, according to the Torah here, it only cares that it's not permanent in a way where it's so high that it requires like foundations that are permanent. Once it's that high, it requires foundations that are permanent, and that is the problem. But if you didn't make it that high that it requires foundations that are permanent, even if you make it permanent, it's fine because it's still a 7-day sukkah. What it meant when it said a 7-day sukkah, it just meant don't make it that high where it's no longer a 7-day sukkah. But it didn't really care if it was 7-day sukkah or not. It was just for the sake of giving you a measurement. Interesting, right? So that concludes. We did this is page B. It starts on B. Never starts on A. We don't have Aleph. It always starts on Bays. There's Bays. Every page has 2 sides. So you have Bays 1 and then Bays 2. Bays 2 we didn't start yet. We're not. That's where we're up to. So we did Bays 1, and we did it with all the Rashis. The next step would really be to see Tosafos. The reason why I have so many pages here, like I turn the page and I'm still on the same page, a standard Gemara won't have that. It's only in this Gemara because we have all these commentary. So we have, like, this from here to here is this page. From here to here is this page. Here it's trying to show us the alleyways. Remember we were talking about alleyways and courtyards? It's trying to give us pictures. Any other pictures? Yeah. Here you have the sukkah, I guess that's too high. Look, so here the shade is not inside the sukkah. You're not sitting in the shade. The shade's over here. That's what I think this image is trying to illustrate. This image, I'm not quite sure what it's trying to illustrate here. Okay, that's it for the images. We could see Tosafos, at least try. Here's Tosafos, okay? Sukkah, right? Okay, Maishnagabe sukkah ditane psule, Maishnagabe mavoi ditane tekanta, right? That's the Gemara started asking. What's unique by a sukkah that it taught invalid, and what's unique by the alleyway, the mavoi, that it taught the rectification, to lower it? Says Tosafos, V'ha deloi parach, and this that we didn't ask. Maishnagabe hadas ditani psula v'tekanta. What's unique by regards to the hadas? Hadas is one of the species that we hold in our hands and shake and wave on the holiday of Sukkot. So, says this is Tosfos. He's trying to answer something. He's trying to say, and this that we didn't ask, what's unique by the case of the hadas? That there it taught us psula and the rectification. It said it's invalid, and it told us how to fix it. Ditnan. The Perek Lulav Hagazol, because it was taught in the chapter. There's a Mishnah in the chapter called Lulav Hagazol, the stolen lulav. Lulav is also one of the species. So in that chapter that's called the stolen lulav that was stolen, it says in parentheses, it's later in this tractate on page 32, folio 2, 32b. What does it say there? It says, Oy shahayu anavav mirubin me alav. Or, so it's giving a few cases there, but I guess one of them is, or if it was, if I guess branches were more than its leaves, I think. Pasul, it's invalid. Ve'imi atan, but if he made it less, the branches, I guess he pulled off the branches. Kosher, it's kosher. So there's some kind of discussion later about ahadas. If the branches are more than the leaves, it's invalid. But if you make it less, the branches, then it will be kosher. So there it said invalid, and it gave the rectification. So why don't we ask from there? Right? That's what's bothering Tosafos. Why don't we ask from that Mishnah? So says Tosafos, Deloi parach ela misukah umavoy shadinam shavel inyan gavaya v'shina lashain mishnasai. He says because we're not asking besides from sukkah to the alleyway that their laws are equal in the matter of the height, and it changed the lashain, it changed the tongue, the words that we used. V'shina lashain Mishnasai. I don't know. It's Mishnah. I guess so. Tosfos says, you know why we ask by the alleyway, from the alleyway to our case of sukkah, because their laws are the same in regards to the height, and still the Mishnah changed the wording. Okay. And further the gabe hadas, and furthermore, so he's saying, and furthermore. You know why we didn't ask from there? The gabe hasam, the gabe hadas, that in regards to the hadas, it's starich lemisne takanta. There, the Mishnah had to teach us its rectification. It had to teach us that. It couldn't just say invalid. That's not meaning you can't ask from there. There, it couldn't just say invalid. It had to actually give the rectification as well. Why? The salka daita chamina, because I would have thought to say, Desalka Daitach. Again, it's Rosh Tevos acronym. Desalka Daitach. That would go your das, your opinion, I think, your mind. Meaning you would think, Desalka Daitach, you would think, Amina to say. You would think, your das would think I should say. Desalka Daitach Amina. You would want to say, Kivan de Gadulai Bepasol Sules Leitakanta. since it grew in an invalid state, there's no way to fix it. It grew like this. It grew with branches more than the leaves. You might have thought, okay, so there's no way to fix it. So in that case, you can't ask me why over there does it say invalid and then it gives its rectification. Because you would have thought there's no way to rectify such a case. That's why it had to give the rectification. Okay, interesting. You see already the difference between Tosfos on the outside of the page and Rashi on the inside. Rashi is much more simple, easy. Tosfos is already building like, analysis, like how much, he's, right? Okay. Again, we could read this Tosfos over and maybe we should. Let's try to understand it a little better. Let's read that one more time, okay? V'hadalai parach mashna gabei hadas tetani psula v'takanta detran beperk lulav agazal oishayu anava meruban me'alav pasol v'miatan kasher. Says, and this that we didn't ask what's unique in regards to the case of hadas, that there was taught it's invalid and it was taught how to rectify it. Why? Because it was taught in the chapter of the stolen lulav that in a case of where the branches were greater than the leaves, it's invalid, but if you made them less, then it's kosher. So what's the answer? Why? We're only asking in the case of Ali and Sukkah that their laws are equal in regards to the height, and the Mishnah changed its language. And furthermore, says that another reason why we didn't ask from there, besides the fact that we only want to ask from these two cases that are actually equal in the law of their height, we can't ask from there anyway because there's no question. There we needed to teach its rectification because you would have thought there's no way to rectify it. You can't fix it because it grew in an invalid way. So we had to tell you, no, you could rectify it. You just take off the leaves, take off the branches, right? Okay, let's see the next verse first. We said, right? We wanted to know what's the difference. Why here it says invalid, there by the alleyway it says lower it. So the Gemara's answer was, in the case of a biblical law, so we taught psula invalid. It says Tosfos, because if in the case of the sukkah, which is biblical, right, the I have a Tana Yamai, because if it taught lower it, if the Mishnah, the author of the Mishnah, the Tana, if he taught, and he said a sukkah that's higher than 20, lower it, Chashinan, we suspect, we're scared, we suspect, Dilma Ta'i Inish, maybe a person will falter, Loimar to say, Yamai lichatchila. Yeah, lichatchila. To begin with, you have to make it lower. V'diavad kshera. But if it already happened and you didn't lower it, you would think it's fine. You would think, oh, it's kosher. V'daktik b'lshainai, and it was very precise with its wording. Dilma asi lidei surah diaraisa, that perhaps he's going to come into the hand of something that's forbidden biblically. V'tani psula, and therefore it taught invalid. Afogav deloy have lishna ma'alya, and even though it's not an elevated language, kamayamaye, like lowering it, that's elevated language. That's like a good language. That's what we would want to say. We'd want to tell you lower it. This is how Tosfos is reading this. He says the only reason by the biblical case of sukkah where we can't say lower it is because we're worried you're going to come to do something that doesn't match the biblical law. You're going to be sitting in a sukkah that's not kosher. We're so worried because it's a biblical law. It's not a rabbinical law where they have leeway. There's no leeway here. It's biblical. So the sages had to protect you, and they can't say lower it, because you might think, oh, if you didn't, you have to lower it, but if you don't, it's fine. So therefore they just said invalid. So it's invalid, right? Okay, aval b'mavai d'Rabbanan. But by the case of the alleyway, which is a rabbinic decree, we didn't suspect for this, and we taught lower it, which is an elevated language, like we find at the beginning, the head of the tractate called Pesachim, Passover, right? The Pesach, right? on page 3, folio 1, she akam, or she what? She akam hakosov kama oisyo shaloi lahitzi davar meguna mipiv. What we find that, I don't know what the akam means. She akam, the verse, I don't know, it did something to many letters that it shouldn't come out something filthy from its mouth. Sure, I know. I don't really get this. Somehow, the way Tosfos is reading this is saying something is invalid is like not a good thing, and we learn it from we'd much rather tell you how to fix it. We'd much rather, instead of telling you invalid, your sukkah's invalid, we'd much rather tell you lower it. We'd much rather tell you lower it. But we can't in this case because we're scared you're not gonna fulfill your biblical command. And how did we learn it? Because we learned there that the verse, I guess, skipped certain letters. I don't know, something with many letters, just in order not to take out something, to put out something filthy from its mouth. Okay, so you see, you have to be very careful with your words. Right? Well, b'kuntris loy parish kain. And he says in the kuntris, which is Rashi, he says it doesn't explain like this. He's saying this way of my thinking that I just gave over is not in accordance with Rashi. Rashi, I guess, came first. I think even some of the Bali Tosfos. Rashi was one person. Tosfos is a collection of people, and I believe a bunch of them come from Rashi. They were like his grandchildren, even. I think. But anyways, he says this way that I'm giving over now, this doesn't go with Rashi. Rashi explains it differently. Okay. Inami yesh lemer. Alternatively, you can say, or also you could say, the lashon yemai mashma chumra derabanan ba'alma. You could say that what the language of lower it. If it's higher than 20, lower it. So that language of lower it, it implies a rabbinic stringency, like just in the world, meaning a general rabbinic stringency. That's what it implies. Upsula mashma dioraisa. And the word invalid, pasul, is implying that it's a biblical law. Okay? So, right, if it's a biblical law, we said we teach invalid. Because so Tosfos says why the first reason was why by a biblical law do you teach invalid? Because we're scared that if we say we tell you to lower it, you're going to think that if you don't lower it, it's fine. Which is not the case. You have to lower it. So we just teach you invalid so that you don't make a mistake. And the second answer, he says, alternatively, is that the word lowering it, the language of lowering it, implies that it's just a rabbinic stringency. Whereas the word invalid implies something that's biblical. Okay? And in the chapter called With What Do We Light, Bama Madlikin, which is in Tractate Shabbos, they're quoting from page 22a. It says there also the 20 Amos Talmud Kribitz. It says there that a ner Chanukah, the light of the flame of Chanukah, the candle of Chanukah, the light of Chanukah, shahanicha lemala me'asr mama, that he placed it higher than 20 amos, 20 cubits. Psula kisuka ukimavoy. It's invalid like a sukkah and an alley. That's what it says there. It's invalid like the sukkah and the alley that are invalid higher than 20. So what's his question? His question is, there you see by the alley, it does say invalid. We're saying that by the alley, which is just rabbinic, so that's why it doesn't say invalid. It says lower it, which implies rabbinic, as opposed to invalid, which implies biblical. So Tosfos is saying, what do you mean? We have a case. If you go to Tractate Shabbos, it says the ner Chanukah, if you put it higher than 20, it's invalid like a sukkah and a mavoy. But the ner Chanukah is rabbinic. The ner Chanukah is not biblical. So how could it say psula there, invalid, right? According to his logic, right? So he says, agav de tanan kisuka, since agav means like happenstance. Since we happen to be teaching about sukkah, which is biblical, nokat nami gabe ner Chanukah psula. So we use this language also regards to the light of Chanukah of psula. Meaning, really, if it was just the light of Chanukah by itself, maybe we wouldn't say psula, because that would imply biblical. But because we're comparing it to sukkah, and we're teaching it in a happenstance way, we're also bringing in sukkah, which is biblical. That's why we could use the word psula. Okay? Inami, alternatively, or, so he's giving a second answer. He's saying, or maybe, you know why there it says psula, even though it says invalid, even though it's not biblical, it's rabbinic. If it said lower it, have a mashma kimois shahaisa madlekas yashbilena v'ze enoi limanda amar hadlaka isa mitzvah. Okay, alternatively, if it taught Yemai, it would imply like the one that says that if he lit it, he can lower it. I'm sorry, it would imply like that if we said lower it, if it's higher than 20, lower it, it would imply that like that if he lit it, he can lower it. And this doesn't fit with the opinion that the mitzvah is the lighting. I guess there's an argument. What's the mitzvah of the Chanukah? Is it lighting the candles or placing them? So if you say the mitzvah is lighting the candles, then you can't lower it. If you lit it and it was higher than 20, you can't lower it now, because when you lit it, it was higher than 20. So he's saying that's why we couldn't say lower it there, even though why he's saying another answer why by Chanukah it didn't say invalid, it said lower it. I'm sorry, the opposite. Why it said invalid and right? Why didn't it say lower it? He would say because that implies that you could lower it, but that wouldn't fit with that opinion that says that the lighting is the mitzvah. And even according to the other opinion, to the one that says hanocha is a mitzvah, placing it is the mitzvah. So what about the other guy though? Right? There's another opinion in the Talmud there that the mitzvah is placing it. So according to that opinion, you still have to answer, why didn't the author of the Mishnah say lower it? Why did he say invalid? Why did he say lower it if it's higher than 20? Why not? Because according to this opinion, he could lower it because the mitzvah is to place it. So if he lit it above 20 and then placed it within 20, he fulfilled his mitzvah. Even according to that opinion, Chayshinan dehayra'ah Aymer litzarchai hu madlika kedamrinan gabe hadlika bifnim vanicha b'chutz. Chayshinan dehayra'ah. Aymer litzarchai hu madlika. So we suspect that what? It looks, we suspect on the looking, it looks funny. Why? Because they're going to say that he lit it for his own needs. If he put it above 20 and then lowered it, what's the problem? Even according to the one who says it's fine, it's still a problem. Why? Because it looks funny. People are going to think you lit it for your own needs, not for the mitzvah. Like we say in regards to lighting it inside and placing it outside. The mitzvah is really to light it outside or have it outside. So according to the one who says that the mitzvah is placing it, maybe I could light it inside and then just place it outside because I put it in outside, right? But we say no because it looks funny. People are going to think you did it not for the mitzvah. Okay? Next Tosfos, the third Tosfos on the page. Amar Rabba Amar Krala Manye Duchule. So we said, how do you know that a sukkah, from what verse, how do we know that a sukkah can't be more than 20 amos, right? So we said Rabbah brought it from the verse, so that your generations will know that it's sukkahs I made the children of Israel dwell. Says Tosfos, Kitzas kasha lelishna kama dibrei sherevin gabe miktzas sukkah b'toy chesrim. It's a little difficult in the first language of the beginning of Eruvin, Tractate Eruvin, in regards to Miktzas Sukkah. like a small sukkah or a small amount of sukkahs. Miktsas sukkah b'toich esrim, within 20. I'm not sure if I'm reading this. I'm not even sure how to read this, but let's just go forward. Dama Rabba hasukkah psula. That Rabba said the sukkah is invalid. Hasholta be'ena. Behold, his eyes rule over it. Kivan te'en chalala esrim. Since its hollowness or something is not 20. The Rabba Goras Hasam, and Rabba has the version, the addition. He read it like ki hacha, like here, Daha Rava Polig Hasam, because Rava argues on him there. The Amar Zevizek kosher, that this and this is kosher. Chalal Sukkah. Kosher Chalal, Sukkah Tanan, Chalal, Mavoy Tanan. Chalal Sukkah Tanan, Chalal Mavoy Tanan. I guess the hollow or of the Sukkah was taught, and the hollow of the alley was taught. I really don't know what I'm reading, but I'm just doing my best, okay? And you can say that there it's explained. Time of the reasoning, Mishum de Sukkah de Biyachid Kahave, Lo Midkar, like on Midkar, Zimnin de Mishtakil Milch Milit Tachas, Oive Haschach, Hanichnas Letoich Esrim, Vekaim Makula Lemala Mesrim, Veravina Nami de Mishane Sukkah de Reisa, Achmiru Baravanan Mikol Markai Mashman de Midiraisa Koshera. I didn't get any of that. So what do we do in such a case? What do you do if you're reading the Tosafot? What do you say, right? This is the Tosafot Swain. So this is why we have the Mesifta Gemara here. Why am I reading from the Mesifta Gemara? Because now look what I can do. I can go to the back here. We find the explanations of Tosafos. Okay. Biure had Tosafos. Why am I not finding this? Here, this Tosafos, okay? Right, let me... One second. By the way, this is really going to get interesting with the shapes. See that? Squares and triangles. Okay, right? This is the regular Gemara without the commentary. The commentary is in the back. They have the same thing with the commentary, but in front you have just the standard Gemara. So anyways, this is our Tosfos, right? Amar Rabba Amar Kra Leman Yedu Chule. So we go right here. That's this one. This is the Tosfos, and then we have here explanations. Let's try to read the Tosfos with their explanations here, because I couldn't get it on my own. Makshim HaTosis. He says the Tosafos they're asking, it's difficult to them. It's a little difficult to the first reading, the first wording, meaning at the beginning of Eruvin. I guess you have a few different sayings. So the first one it's difficult according to the first one there. In regards to Gabe Mikzas Sukkah B'toich Esrim, in the case where part of the sukkah is within 20. Okay, so now they have the commentary. The Isasham Kach Mikzas Koire B'toich Esrim, or Mikzas Koire L'malei Me'esrim, Mikzas Chach B'toich Esrim, Mikzas Chach L'malei Me'esrim, L'fi Loshain Echad B'sugya Sham. So in the sugya there, in Eruvin, it talks about when part of the in the case of the alleyway, and you have the stick going from wall to wall. So what if that stick is partially above 20 and partially within 20? And also in the case of the sukkah, what if the covering, the schach, is part of it above 20 and part of it within 20? Okay? According to one of the versions that are brought down there, one of the statements. So that would be, it's a little difficult. Why? Dama Rabba sukkah psula, because Rabba says that the sukkah is invalid. Rabba Omer, in this commentary here, Rabba Omer de b'movoi kosher b'sukkah pasol. Rabba says that in the case of the alleyway it's kosher, but in the case of the sukkah it's invalid. And it's difficult that, behold, Rabba says in our sugya, in our content that we're studying, that the reason that the sukkah above 20 amma is psula is because your eyes don't see it. And in this way, where part of the schach is within 20, hashal tabeina, your eyes do see it. Because it's within 20. Just because part of it goes above 20, so what? It's still within 20 that you could see, the bottom part at least, right? Very interesting. Kimdein chalala esrim, because it's hollow space from the floor till the schach. It's not 20. So the eye can see the schach. And you fulfill the verse very nicely, that you know that you're in the sukkah. So if so, why is the sukkah puzzle if part of the schach is above 20? You can't say that it's because your eyes don't see when it's over 20. But in our case, where half of the schach is above the 20, half is below, or part and part, your eyes do see. So why is it invalid? That's a good, smart question, right? See, this is Tosfos. This is a good, By the way, besides Rashi and Tosfos, there's so many other commentaries from the same time period, Also from after them, I'm saying, but there's a lot more commentaries. If we wanted to go through, we could take forever on just, one page, just take all the different commentaries, what they say. There's so many, it almost doesn't end. People are still writing commentaries to this day, by the way, on this stuff. Trying to put all the other commentaries together and fit everything together. Okay, so if you want to answer, if you want to say that, he's saying, and if you want to say there that it's not Rabbah, but it's Rava, and it's just a mistake in the name, it's not Rabbah, it's Rava. He's saying that's not the case. It is Rabbah. V'Rabbah. V'Rabbah Goras Hasam. Kihacha. The correct version there in the Talmud is Rabbah. Rava Polygasam al Rava. Because Rava argues there on Rava. So it can't be that Rava. You can't say, oh, it's Rava. No, we know it's really Rava. You could say, oh, maybe it meant to say Rava. No, because Rava's opinion comes to argue on Rava there. So it can't be Rava. It's definitely Rava. Vamar Zevizeh. And so Rava comes to argue, and he says both the case of the alley and sukkah is kosher when part of it is above 20 and part of it's below 20. Chalal sukkah tanan, chalal mavoy tanan. Because it was talking about the hollow space from the floor till the ceiling in the sukkah, and the hollow space from the floor till the beam in the alley. So the one who says it's forbidden, it's invalid, such a case, partially above and partially below in the case of a sukkah, it definitely is Rabbah and not Rava. Okay? So now we have the answer of Tosfos. V'yesh lo emar daha mefarish hasam taima. Rabbah mefarzakia. I don't know what that means. Mefarisham. It's taima shel Rabbah. Sukkah machshir b'movay. Okay, there he explains his reasoning. Mishum de sukkah de biyachid kahave. That most of the times that you're using a sukkah, it's one person, as an individual person. Loka midkar. And so he doesn't always pay attention. V'zimnin demishtakil militachas oive haschach hanichnas otoich esrim. And sometimes it's going to happen that part of the schach, which is lower than 20, it will be moved from there or will fall. The kai makula and all of the schach is going to be higher than 20. And because in the case of an individual, we suspect that maybe he's not going to pay attention to the matter, and he's going to sit in an invalid sukkah. which is not the case by the alley that the Rabbim, the majority, uses it, meaning the public uses it. It's generally when you go to a sukkah, it's for you. You go to the sukkah, each man makes his sukkah, right? Which is not the case for the alley and the marker. That's public. Everyone's, it's not for the individual, it's for the public. And if the beam that's going wall to wall and it's halfway, part of it below 20, part of it above 20, if something happens to the lower part and now it's all above 20, we are relying that one of the people that use this alley, that live in this alley, is going to pay attention to the matter, and he's going to tell everyone else in the alley, by the way, we have a problem with the marker, we have to fix it before Shabbat, right? Or you can't carry from one domain to the other because of the rabbinic decree. So Tosafos had a question that why does Rabbah say there that a sukkah is invalid if part of the schach is within 20, if his whole logic is that your eyes have to see it, and if part of the schach is within 20, you could see it? So Tosafos is answering, you know why? Because what if now the schach that's below 20 falls and all the schach is above 20? It's going to be an issue. Why is that not an issue by the alley? Because by the alley, it's used by the public. One of the people is going to notice and tell everyone else. Ravina nami de mishane. And Ravina also that he taught Sukkah di'araisa achmiru barabanan. Sukkah that is higher than 20 amma is invalid from the Torah. And therefore also in a way where part of it is below 20 and part of it is above 20, even though from the Torah it should be kosher, because your eyes can see it, the rabbis made a decree because maybe it's going to come to be all of it above 20. So they made a decree that if it's part below and part above, it's just not okay, even though it really is okay. The rabbis said it's not okay. But by the alleyway, that its whole ruling is rabbinic, they didn't make such a decree, because the whole thing is decree. So they didn't make a decree to invalidate it when part is within 20 and part is above 20. Because if they made such a decree, you would come out, you have a decree on a decree. And we don't do that. The whole thing is already a rabbinic decree. We're not going to add a rabbinic decree to protect you from a rabbinic decree. We only have rabbinic decrees to protect you so that you shouldn't miss out on a biblical commandment, but on a rabbinic commandment, which is just, right? If it's just a decree, we don't need a second decree to protect you for a decree. The decree is to protect you from biblical stuff, not from rabbinic stuff. Okay? Mikol makoim mashma d'mediaraisa kshera. In any case, it's implied that from the biblical, it's kosher. And according to all those that were mentioned, those opinions that were mentioned, we see that from the Bible, a Torah that is the schach that is partially within 20, partially above 20, and Rabbah goes according to his opinion that since the whole invalidacy of the sukkah above 20 amos is because you're not going to see it with your eyes, and here your eyes see because part of it's within 20, but rather the rabbis decreed that it's invalid because we don't want you to come to make it where it's all above 20. Let's read that again and try to make sense of it. Right? We said Rabbah said that the verse says you have to know you're sitting in the sukkah, and that's why it can't be more than 20 amos. Says Tosafos. It's a little difficult. Ksas kasha lelishna kama dibrei sherevin. It's a little difficult, this concept, according to the first saying, the first lishna that is brought at the beginning of Eruvin on 3b. In Gabe Miktzah Sukkah B'toich Esrim, where where part of the schach is within the 20 and parts above the 20. Da Amar Rabba Hasuk Psula, because it's difficult. Why? Because Rabba says there that it's invalid. But the question is, Hashalta Be'ena. But he could see it. Why is it invalid? If parts below 20 and parts above 20, the whole logic is that your eyes have to see it, and above 20 you can't see it, but here part of it's below 20, so your eyes could see it, so why is it invalid? Partially above 20 and partially below 20, why is it invalid? Kivan de ein chalala esrim. Yeah, exactly. So your eyes see it since the hollow space is not 20, meaning the top of the schach is above 20, but the space between the floor and the schach is not 20. The Rabba Garas Hasam. And it is Rabba there. You can't claim that it's Rava and it's someone else. No, it's definitely Rabba. Hi hacha deha Rava Polygasam. Like this, that we have Rava argues on Rabba there. So you can't say it's Rava and it's not Rabba. No, Rava argues there on Rabba. It's definitely Rabba. V'amar zev zeh kosher. Because Rava says this and this are kosher. A mavoi and a sukkah in a case where it's partially above, partially below 20. He says they're both kosher. Halal sukkah tanan, halal mavoi tanan. Because he says it's talking about the space of the sukkah and the space of the alleyway. The Yesh Loimar, and you can answer, you could say, Daha Mefarish sometime that he explains there the reasoning, Mishum de Sukkah de Biyachid Kahave, that Sukkah is about an individual, like a midkar, he doesn't recognize, like a midkar. How do we translate that? Let's go back a second. Yeah, he doesn't remember midkar. The Zion from Hebrew becomes a Dalet in Aramaic, I guess. Okay, so he doesn't he doesn't remember. Right? So we can answer and say that there the reasoning of that is because sukkah is talking about an individual, and he doesn't pay attention. He doesn't remember. V'zimnin dimishtakil militachas oive haschach hanichnas l'toich esrim. So sometimes it can happen something from the bottom of the thickness of the schach that enters into the 20. The kai makula l'malam esrim, and it's all that's left is the part of the schach that was above 20. The part that was below 20, like, fell down or something. So that's why, according to Rabbah, part above 20, part below 20 is an issue by sukkah, but not by the alleyway. By sukkah, which is one person, he's not going to notice if the part below 20 fell off. By the mavoi, they will know, because it's used by the public. Someone's going to notice. Ravina nami demishane sukkah deraisa chmiru ba rabbanan. And Ravina, he's a character. Ravina has his own. He has a different reasoning. He says that sukkah, which is a biblical law, the rabbis were stringent, and they said that in such a case, part above 20 and part below 20, it wouldn't be good.
Excuse me. כשאתה יוצא לכבות תורות, אתה יודע איך מכבים תורות?
לא, אבל תכפה אותם עכשיו, לא.
לא.
זאת תורות. אוקיי. אוקיי.
זה דלת.
אוקיי.
שרקח.
Thank you. Achmir bar Rabbanan mikol makam mashma dimidaraisa kshera. So Ravina also he answers that sukkah, which is a rabbinic ruling, the rabbis were stringent and said partially above, partially below is no good, as opposed to a mavlei, which is derabanan, the alley, which is rabbinic. It's fine. They didn't make a decree. Mikol makam mashma dimidaraisa kshera. In any case, it's implied that from the biblical law, it is kosher. Such a case where you have a sukkah that the schach is partially above 20, partially below 20, it would be kosher biblically. One last Tosafos, and we are done. Amid Aleph, B number 1. So we have the last Tosafos. So like this: Ki avad leidiras keva shaper dummy. If he made it a permanent dwelling, it's fine. Even if he made it permanent, like with iron walls, as long as it's below 20, right? Says Taisvis. Dafagav di yesh lefarish kra bedira she'ena ru'uya ela l'shiva l'meute kava. That even though you could explain the verse that it has to be a house that is not fit besides for 7 days to exclude a permanent dwelling, right? You could interpret it that it means no, it has to be a temporary dwelling, a 7-day dwelling, and if it's a permanent dwelling, it's not kosher. Mashmale kra da asal shure le'oyruye l'chamidas goiva. It's implied in the verse that it's coming to give you a measurement, to teach you the measurement of its height. As if to say that what? A sukkah that's possible to make temporary. Okay? That's what it's implied. And if you're going to say that since we don't care, besides that it should be fit to be made temporary, you're saying it doesn't have to be temporary. It can be permanent. It just has to be in a way that could technically be made temporary. And even though he made it permanent, and even though if he made it permanent, it's fine. So imkain, if so, on my Amar, why is it said in Tractate Tainus on Beis Amud Aleph, B1, in the beginning of Tractate Tainus, it says, Geshamim simin klala b'chag. Rain is a sign of a curse on the Chag, on the holiday of Sukkot. Why does it say that? Behold, is he not able to set the planks, I guess, with nails or something, so that the rain shouldn't come into the sukkah? So he's saying, why does it say there that it's a curse, a sign of a curse if it rains on the holiday? What do we care if it rains? I'll just board up my sukkah. I won't get rained on. Vafilu timtzi laimar da'asr mishum gezeras tikra. And even if you're going to say that that's forbidden because of a decree of a tikra, which I think means a roof, like just like we say later on in Beperkin in our chapter on 14a, Gabe Plugsa Rabbi Meir of Rabbi Yehuda, in regards to the argument of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Demisachichin benisarin, in the case of where you cover it with, you schach with nisarin, I think are boards. Di'i machsheres bohu, that because if we made it kosher in such a case, asi lemeimar, you come to say mali l'schach bazeh, mali leishev tachas tikras basi. What's the difference? What do I need this schach? What is it to me to be covered with this, or to sit under the roof of my house? And his house is for sure invalid from the Bible. The sukkah amar rachmana, the loy beisai, because the Torah says a sukkah, not his house. The loy beisai shall call shana, not his house from the whole year. In any case, since it's not forbidden besides from the rabbinic, you can't say that the rain is a simin klala. Because I could just board it up. You're saying you can't board it up. The rabbis don't let. Okay, but biblically I could board it up. So how could you say it's a curse, a sign of a curse, if biblically I could just board it up? Something like that. Okay, it's more or less the gist. And you can answer that. Granted, we don't care. We don't suspect with the walls if you make them permanent. We don't. It's fine. But in any case, with the covering, with the schach. That the main thing of the sukkah is because of the schach, because of the name schach, the covering. Loy mis kashra ad avid la are. We don't make it kosher until he makes it in a temporary way. which the rain could get through. And for this reasoning, it's also going good according to Rabbi Zera. It was one of the opinions, the Darish midechsev, because he expounded it from the verse V'sukkati l'tzel, that the sukkah should be for you shade. Ha'ksiv nami mizer mumimater. It's written there also from the wind and rain, or two kinds of rain or something. And it's required in it that it shouldn't come within it rain. So it has to protect from the rain. But rather because we need a covering, the schach, that is temporary, then kain havale keva. And if so, it is permanent. Let's read the commentary on that. I think we're done though. I think we're done, right? All the way down till here. And if we go to the next page, yeah, it's already talking about something else. Exactly, good. So we're done the first page. Let's just read that comment. Let's just read the Tosfos again in a proper understanding, at least the end of it. And if he made the schach in a way where the rain can't get in, it's permanent and invalid. What was the what? And for this reason, it's also good to Rabbi Zera that explained that the reason why over 20 is invalid, because it said sukkah should be for you shade, and we learned from there that the sukkah is called that because it gives you shade, and automatically you need that the shade of the sukkah should be only from the covering, from the schach, which is the main part of the sukkah, and not from the walls. And until 20 amos, you're sitting in the shade of the schach, but higher 20 amos, the walls are bringing you shade. And so it's apparently difficult because haksiv nami mizar mumater. It implies, it says also that it's protecting from the flow and the rain, and it implies that the sukkah needs to make like a concealing from the flow and the rain, and if not, it's not a sukkah. Apparently, you need, according to the law, that the sukkah should be strong enough and protective on the people in it that the rain shouldn't get them wet. So elavadai must be mishum debainan schacha arai. Vimken. It must be that the rain could get in, because everyone admits it has to be temporary. I'm not so clear on this, but at least you got to see it. You I don't know who's watching, who's gonna see this, but you see now what it's like to read a page of Gemara. And this is only half a page, because there's side A and side B, folio A and B. This is half a page of Talmud. Typically, you have people that study literally 18 hours a day Talmud. Literally 18 hours a day, and that's a thing. It's very rare, but there are such people. But a general student in yeshiva studies between 8 to 10 hours, maybe even more, but between 8 to 10 hours of Talmud a day. This is what they're doing, studying the Talmud with Rashi and Tosafos, and then other commentaries as well. But what about businessmen? So Rav Meir Shapiro instituted the Daf Yomi, I don't know how many years ago, but the Daf Yomi is where even businessmen who are not studying full-time, they study a page a day. So they do double what we just did. We did half a page. They do both sides of the page. So just imagine, you can do it quick, you can do it long, but they do a page a day, and it takes 7.5 years to go through the entire Talmud, and that's only the Babylonian Talmud. There's also the Jerusalem Talmud. Just to give you an image of what's going on here. Thank you. I'd love some feedback, okay?